If you cannot define woke, you are not arguing, you are casting a spell. And spells are useful for one thing, controlling crowds without persuading minds. They bypass reasons and go straight to the herd. So let's do something unfashionable. Instead of trading spells, let's test the word like a claim. I am Socrates, remembered because I treated opinions like witnesses. I cross-examined them and paid for it. You have brought me back to argue about a word. Not justice, not courage, not the good life, a word. Woke, good. Then let us see whether this word is thinking for you, because I have watched people in your age use words the way my city used the crowd, as shortcuts around reason. A label becomes a verdict. A slogan becomes a substitute for truth. Some people spit woke as if that ends the matter. Others wear it as if that makes them virtuous, and both sides gain the same advantage. They do not have to define anything, prove anything, or examine themselves. Before we go any further, I want to give you a scene, because your mind deserves an example before it deserves a lecture. Scene 0. You are in a comment section. Someone says, "That's woke," no argument, no citation, no trade-off, just the word, thrown like a bucket of paint. And now your brain is invited to do something very efficient and very stupid. Pick a side. Not think, not weigh, not ask true or false. Just sort people into camps. So here is the bargain I offer you at the start, so you know what you are buying with your attention. In the next minutes, I will try to make this word useless as a weapon by forcing it to become a definition. And if you stay with me, you will leave with 3 tools you can use in real arguments, online, at work, at your table, without becoming a pawn of any tribe, any side, any faction, any algorithm, or any mood. Let me name those tools now, clearly, so you can hold me accountable. First, we have the definition test. If you can't define the word, you can't use it to win. Second, the method test. Separate the moral impulse from the social machinery built around it. The third tool is the translation test. If you speak through the dead, you must translate, not ventriloquize. So I will begin where thinking begins. When you say woke, do you mean awake to suffering and hypocrisy? If so, who would praise sleep? Or do you mean something else? A demand for obedience, a ritual of the approved words, a moral theater where the goal is not to understand but to shame, or the demand that the familiar unconditionally surrender to the strange and treat normal as the bad word. If you cannot say what you mean, then woke is not a concept, it is a spell. And I have never trusted spells, especially the ones that make people feel righteous. Tell me, when a word means everything, does it mean anything? Before we go further, hear me clearly. This is not a sermon against compassion, nor a defense of cruelty, nor a message for one faction alone. It is an exercise in definition, because definition is where propaganda cannot survive. I am not your historian. I am a dramatized instrument for questions you avoid. Call this what it is, a thought experiment with teeth. No incense, no absolution, just questions with consequences. Let me spare you a common misunderstanding at the start. In Athens, I was not a man of factions, but we had the same habit you have, ending inquiry with a word. Some called the word impious. Others called it subversive. The word does the work so the mind will not have to. So do not mistake me for voting for a modern team. I am here to ask whether your moral language clarifies reality or commands obedience. A label will not replace a reason. And since your age is impatient, I will be plain about our route, so you know exactly what we are doing. We will examine 3 things. First, what this word is doing to your mind. Second, how virtue can be turned into a weapon. And third, how to speak through the dead without turning them into puppets. And yes, some of what people attack under this label deserves attack, and some of what people defend under it deserves defense. The point is not the badge. The point is whether the reasons survive daylight. Now, slowly. Not slogans, reasons. I will not merely mock the word. I will examine the impulse beneath it. There is often a noble impulse in what many people mean when they speak of waking up. Many are born into comfort and never notice the cost of their comfort. They step over the weak as if stepping over stones. They inherit a world arranged to flatter them, and then they imagine they are simply superior. They accept the city's lies because the lies are convenient. So wake up can mean stop lying to yourself. Notice what you have been trained not to see. Examine what the crowd rewards and what it punishes. Ask who benefits from the story you are told about reality. That, at its best, is philosophy. That is the beginning of justice. But your age does something clever with noble impulses. It turns them into badges. It takes, I notice something true, and upgrades it into, I am one of the good. And once morality becomes identity, discussion becomes treason. Then the argument is no longer about what is true. It is about who is pure. But now comes the question I have always asked, and it remains the most dangerous question in any city. When you claim to be on the side of justice, are you actually pursuing justice, or are you pursuing victory? Because there is a way of speaking about suffering that is not aimed at relieving suffering at all. It is aimed at acquiring power. And power loves moral costumes because moral costumes silence questions. In my city, we had Sophists, clever men trained to win arguments whether or not they were true. They sold the appearance of wisdom. They taught young men how to dominate the assembly, how to stir the crowd, how to weaponize words so that the crowd would feel and applaud rather than think. Do not tell me your age has outgrown this. You have merely industrialized it. You have made the sophist scalable. You have built a world where a person may gain status not by being virtuous, but by being seen condemning the correct villains, where a person may avoid the pain of self-examination by constantly examining others, where moral language can be used like a club, not to teach, not to heal, but to strike, to shame, to exile, and where institutions learn to preempt blame by performing virtue, because performance is cheaper than reform. Let me make this concrete, because abstraction is a comfortable hiding place. Consider 3 more small scenes in addition to the one we started with, Scene 0. No names, no tribes, no slogans, just human incentives. Scene 1. A person makes a claim, perhaps about a policy, a statistic, a trade-off. The response is not, is it true? But who would say that? A label is applied, woke, or its mirror image, and the conversation ends. Not because the claim was disproven, but because the speaker was placed into a hated box. This is not reasoning. This is sorting. It is a shortcut around evidence. Scene 2. A workplace, a school, an institution announces a new moral language. It begins with good intentions. Be respectful, notice harm, include the excluded. But soon the incentives shift. People learn that the safest path is not honesty, but ritual. They recite the approved phrases the way priests recite prayers, not to become wiser, but to avoid punishment. And when language becomes a compliance test, truth becomes a liability. Scene 3. A genuine victim speaks and deserves to be heard. But then the crowd learns an ugly trick. Pain can be performed. Outrage becomes currency. And soon the loudest suffering sets the law, whether or not it sets the truth. And the quiet, boring reality, the kind measured in numbers and trade-offs, loses every time. So we must separate the impulse from the method. Empathy is a virtue. But empathy is not a mind. It does not think. It does not measure. It does not weigh competing goods. It does not tell you what is true. It tells you what hurts, and what hurts is not always unjust. A thief hurts when you take back what he stole. A tyrant hurts when you deny him obedience. A liar hurts when you refuse his story. Pain is real, but pain is not proof. Therefore, if you build your politics on empathy alone, you will be ruled by whoever performs pain most persuasively. If you build your morality on empathy alone, you will be manipulated by those who can manufacture outrage. So, empathy must be joined to something else: reason, proportion, and the love of truth. And also the willingness to be corrected, especially by people you dislike. Here is a plain sentence your era desperately needs. Pain deserves compassion and human regard. It does not automatically deserve agreement, nor does it automatically deserve policy. We already named tool number 1, the definition test. We'll use it in part 2. For now, let's take tool number 2, the method test, in one sentence. Respect the impulse, interrogate the method. And to be concrete, I'm speaking here not only to those who sneer at compassion, but to those who weaponize compassion. Liberal, woke, institutional, respectable, turning virtue into a compliance test. Good. We have moved from the word to the impulse beneath it. Now we move from impulse to method, because the same moral language that can awaken a conscience can also be used to control a crowd. Hold this thought. It will return. Now we arrive at the problem you call presentism. This is the habit of judging the past as if the past were living under your laws, your language, your taboos, your categories, and your fashionable conclusions. It is the habit of using the dead as props in the quarrels of the living. I understand the temptation. If you feel morally superior to those who came before you, your life becomes easy. You need not examine your own failures, because you can always point to the failures of dead men. But ask yourself, what is the purpose of bringing back a dead person to speak? If you bring him back merely to scold him, you are not doing philosophy. You are doing theater. If you bring him back merely to make him applaud your team, your current coalition, you are not doing history. You are doing propaganda. And if you bring him back merely to dress your opinions in his authority, you are not seeking wisdom. You are seeking a mask. Now I will say something that may sound harsh, but it is meant as a craft constraint, not a personal insult. If you bring back a person from the past and he speaks with your modern slogans, you have not brought him back. You have brought yourself back wearing his face. But do not confuse two different acts. To place a person in your time is not to make him your time. To let him see modernity is not to let him inherit your certainties. The dead are not here to validate you. They are here to resist you. So how do we avoid ventriloquism? We impose discipline. A man is not merely a list of positions. He is a pattern of thought. He has incentives. He has blind spots. He has loyalties. He has fears. He has pride. He has habits. He has a way of reasoning that is not yours, because his world is not yours. If you ignore those and make him speak like a pamphlet, you have created not a character but a puppet. And I should confess something that complicates this. In your world, many know me through the writings of Plato, my student. He wrote dialogues and placed my name at the center of them. Sometimes he captured my spirit, and sometimes perhaps he used me as a mouthpiece for an architecture of ideas that was his. So when I warn you about ventriloquism, I do not speak as an innocent man. I speak as the most famous puppet in philosophy. And yes, I hear the irony, a dead man complaining about being used by the living. But irony is not a refutation. It is a reminder to be careful. The fact that I am implicated does not make the warning false. It makes it urgent. That is why I am insisting on discipline. If you speak through another voice, you owe the audience your method, not just your conclusion. So the question is not, would he agree with me? The better question is, given what he loved, what he feared, what he rewarded, what he punished, and what he believed about human nature, what would he likely notice? Notice, not instantly endorse. And then this question too, what would he misunderstand? Because if you bring back a man and he never misunderstands anything, he is not a man. He is an angel, and angels are not good teachers, they are sermons. The friction is the point. The dissonance is the lesson. Now return with me to your word, woke, because this is where the crowd tries to rush you. When someone calls you woke as an insult, what are they doing? Often they are trying to do one of two things. First, they are trying to dismiss your argument without meeting it. If they can place you into a hated category, they do not have to engage your reasons. They can stop thinking and start sneering. Second, they are trying to make you ashamed of compassion. They are saying, if you care about the weak, you are foolish. If you feel for the excluded, you are soft. If you speak against cruelty, you belong to an enemy team. That is not a refutation. That is a manipulation. So you do not need to run from the word. You need to deprive it of magic. Ask calmly, what do you mean by it? If they refuse to define it, then it is a spell, not a thought. If they define it as empathy, you can say, I am not ashamed of empathy. If they define it as lying about reality to flatter the feelings of a faction, You can say, I do not endorse lying, and we can argue about what is true. If they define it as using moral language to seize power through shame and fear, you can say, then we agree this is a danger and we should oppose it. Do you see? The word dissolves when you insist on definition. That is why partisans hate definition. Definition is the enemy of tribal certainty. Here's tool number 1, again in a sentence you can actually use in public. Define it specifically, or stop using it as an argument. Now let me Steelman properly both sides, in the clearest terms I can, because if you cannot present the best version of an argument, you are not arguing with it, you are shadow boxing. The best version of the complaint people often mean when they attack wokeness is this. A moral cause is being used to demand obedience. People are punished for speaking plainly, even when their intent is honest. Institutions reward fear and conformity, and reality is sometimes bent to protect a narrative. That complaint, when true, is not wicked. It is a warning about coercion. It is a warning about using morality as a muzzle. If they attack woke because they mean compassion, basic decency toward the excluded, then they are attacking a virtue, not a vice. If they attack woke because they mean coercion, obedience demanded by shame, fear, and ritual, then they are warning you about a real danger. And if they attack woke because they mean posture, status theater dressed as morality, then again, the remedy is the same. Definition, not chanting. And the best version of what people often mean when they defend being woke is this. Many suffer invisibly, many inherit advantages they refuse to see. Cruelty is often normalized. Hypocrisy hides inside tradition. So we must notice harm, challenge the comfortable lie, and widen our circle of moral concern, and refuse convenient blindness. That impulse, when sincere, is not tyranny. It is moral awakening. It is a demand that the normal be examined, not merely inherited. If they define it as compassion, as simply being awake to suffering and hypocrisy, then do not be ashamed of compassion. If they define it as coercion, a ritual of approved words enforced by shame and fear, then oppose it and argue in daylight about what is true. And if they define it as posture, a cultural sermon that treats normal as an insult and weirdness as a badge, the remedy is the same: define it. So the adult question is not which team wins. The adult question is which methods produce truth and which methods produce fear. Which methods let errors be corrected and which methods make correction punishable. But let me speak to the other side as well, because the misuse is not confined to one camp. Some cling to woke as an identity. To them it means, I am good, but goodness is not a costume. It is not a pin. It is not a flag. It is a way of being that survives scrutiny. If you want to be good, you must be willing to ask, what if I am wrong? What if my intentions are noble, but my methods are corrupt? What if my compassion is being exploited? And here is the test. The test is not whether you can denounce the approved villains. The test is whether you can see your own side's temptations. Can you notice when compassion becomes control? Can you notice when the desire to protect becomes the desire to punish? Can you notice when the wish to include becomes the demand to submit? And can you notice the mirror image temptation when the desire to speak freely becomes the desire to speak cruelly, when resistance to coercion becomes contempt for the weak? Because any moral movement, once it grows, attracts a certain kind of person, the person who enjoys righteousness more than justice. He does not love the suffering. He loves the feeling of superiority. He does not want to persuade, he wants to humiliate. He does not want to build a better city, he wants to be part of the priesthood. And every counter-movement attracts its own parasite, the person who enjoys backlash more than truth. Such a person will always find a way to weaponize virtue. If you hand him the language of empathy, he will turn it into a tool of coercion. If you hand him the language of liberation, he will turn it into a method of domination. And then a backlash comes, and the backlash is not entirely irrational. People resent being commanded in the name of goodness. So yes, I will criticize the fashionable moralism of my age when it becomes coercion, and I will also criticize the backlash when it becomes a license for cruelty. I refuse to be recruited by either tribe. But beware, the backlash also attracts opportunists. It attracts those who are never interested in truth, only in revenge. It attracts those who want permission to be cruel again. They do not want freedom. They want impunity. So what is the wise path? The wise path is not choose a team. The wise path is refuse the shortcut. Be empathetic, but do not be gullible. Be compassionate, but do not surrender your mind. Be morally serious, but do not be morally theatrical. And above all, speak as if truth matters more than applause, because applause is cheap, and it trains you to lie. Now, if you want to take this seriously as craft, as a discipline for your own speech, here is a simple rule you can apply to yourself. If you cannot state your opponent's view in a way that they would recognize as fair, you do not yet understand it. And if you cannot admit where your own side is tempted to lie, you are not seeking truth, you are seeking belonging. And if you cannot survive definition, then you are not speaking, you are signaling. And if your signaling collapses the moment someone asks a question, it was never moral seriousness, it was a shield. Here is the shorter version, so no one can pretend they missed it. If you won't define your words, you don't want a conversation, you want a victory. And victories purchased by ambiguity are the cheapest kind, because they teach you nothing. Now I will apply this rule to you, the creator, because it is easy to preach fairness and harder to practice it. If your work only ever punishes one side, you are not training your audience to love truth. You are training them to love a team. And even if you call yourself independent, your pattern will instruct them more loudly than your disclaimer. So make yourself a vow, not for your critics, but for your craft. Criticize your own side in public, whatever you think your own side is, so that your audience learns that no faction owns you. And so you prove in practice that you are not selling them a catechism. Now let me give you a more practical test for your project of bringing people back, a quick test, a clean one. Write one line for a character that you yourself dislike, but that is consistent with his temperament and era. Write one line where he resists your modern categories. Write one line where he surprises you. If you cannot do this, you do not yet know him. And if you can do this, if you can let him disagree with you in a way that is plausible, then when he agrees with you, it will feel earned. It will not feel like propaganda. That is how you avoid presentism. Not by pretending you have no moral beliefs, but by refusing to smuggle those beliefs into another person's mouth without an argument. Not by becoming neutral, but by becoming disciplined. Let me demonstrate briefly, because craft should be visible. Imagine you summon a stern Roman, or a medieval monk, or a proud Athenian general. If every one of them instantly speaks your current slogans, you have learned nothing. But if one of them says, "I do not recognize your categories," and forces you to translate your moral claims into reasons, then the exercise becomes philosophy again, because translation is where you discover whether you understand your own beliefs. Here's tool 3, in one sentence. Let the dead resist you, then translate your claim into reasons they would understand. Now, before I end, let us gather what we have established. A word that cannot be defined becomes a spell. Empathy without reason becomes a lever. And the dead, if you do not impose discipline, become puppets. And costumes are used the same way, to sneak conclusions past the audience's judgment while pretending to be above politics. Now I will offer you a final set of questions, because questions are the honest way to end. And if you will define your terms with me, I will meet you there without sneering. You say you are for empathy. Good. Toward whom? Toward the weak, yes, but also toward your enemy when he is weak, toward the foolish when he is wrong, toward the offender when he is ashamed. If your empathy vanishes the moment someone wears the wrong label, then it is not empathy. It is factional affection. And if your empathy vanishes the moment the label changes, tell me, was it ever empathy at all? Or was it just loyalty dressed as love? You say you are against coercion. Good. Are you against coercion only when it is done by your opponents, or also when it is done by your allies? Are you against coercion by law, but in favor of coercion by crowd? Because coercion by crowd is still coercion. And coercion by policy is still coercion when it is justified by slogans instead of reasons. You say words matter. Good. Are you using words to clarify or to intimidate? Do you correct people to teach them or to display dominance? Do you demand precision or do you demand submission? You say you are awake. Good. Awake to what? To suffering, yes. But are you awake to incentives? Awake to the way institutions are captured by status seekers? Awake to the way moral language becomes a market? Awake to the way anger feels like knowledge? Ask these questions, and you will do more good than 1,000 chants. So here is my proposal to you. Whether you are right or left, believer or skeptic, loyal to a party, or disgusted by them all, if you suspect your compassion has become a performance, be honest about that, because performance is not virtue. If someone tries to end an argument by calling you woke, ask them what they mean. If someone tries to end an argument by calling you bigoted, ask them what they mean. If someone tries to end an argument by calling you unpatriotic, ask them what they mean. And if someone tries to end an argument by calling you a good person, ask them what claim you are, being bribed not to examine. Words that cannot survive definition are not tools for truth. They are tools for control. Be empathetic, yes, but do not let empathy replace your mind. Care about suffering, yes, but do not let outrage become your ruler. Care about truth, yes, but do not let truth become a club you use to avoid conscience. And demand this of yourself: do not borrow dead people as costumes for your modern certainties. If you bring back the dead, let them reason from who they were, their virtues, their blind spots, their incentives, their era. Otherwise, you are not conversing with the dead, you are preaching with a puppet. And if you must borrow a voice, because drama is your chosen form, borrow it with an honest label. Tell the audience what this is: a speculative monologue, a disciplined thought experiment, not a recovered transcript, and not a holy text. Because once you pretend it is holy, you exempt it from critique. And exemption is the seed of every tyranny, left, right, and ancient. One more rule, simple enough to remember when you are angry. Never let a label do the work that your reasons refuse to do. If your reasons cannot do the work, you do not have reasons. You have a mood. If you do not demand reasons, even from your own side, then tell me, what exactly are you loyal to? Finally, judge this not as a recovered transcript from Athens, but as an exercise. If you came here to chant, you will be disappointed. If you came here to think, welcome.